Hi, my name is Álvaro Guren, and today I will be deriving a knowledge issue from an assigned real-life situation in which we were divided into groups and allocated a particular secondary school's homeroom teacher whose students we were to survey as a means to test their honesty and how they react to uncomfortable situations. The knowledge issue I have chosen to derive and analyze in terms of different perspectives, AOKs and WOKs, is the following. To what extent can language be used to manipulate others? However, before moving on any further, I would like to mention that not all my assigned students took the survey either because they were missing on the day that my group and I conducted it, or because they simply didn't feel confident enough to do so, which in my opinion still says a lot about the knowledge issue in question. This minor complication does affect the validity of our results, and it's definitely a variable we'd have to better control for in the future, but for now we just have to work with the data range we have, which would still be quite small even if all the students had taken it. The first question, when you go to parties or social gatherings, do you ever drink any alcoholic beverages, is a clear example of how we use language to manipulate our respective 10th grade students. We thought that it was written in such a way that most students would be rather inclined to respond no in their answers, knowing that underage drinking is an activity that is not only frowned upon by the school but also illegal. We touched this subject because in the Peruvian culture, or all around the world for that matter, it is widely known that people start drinking in their adolescence. However, the results were quite unexpected, as out of the 6 students surveyed, 5 responded yes and only 1 responded no. What most probably happened is that with the inclusion of words like or, ever, and any, we made the question much broader, and students felt more uncomfortable lying. Thus, we ended up proving the exact opposite thing we wanted to prove. Either way, it still showcased how we can use language to manipulate others, just not in the direction we intended it to. Nonetheless, our question did determine that our assigned group was for the most part fairly honest, given that it is most likely that the people who respond yes to that type of question are usually saying the truth. After all, underage drinking is a hazardous activity, and we would find it absurd for people to falsely state that they do engage in it. Nonetheless, this is all mere speculation, and we can never know for sure if our results are 100% accurate. The second question is of the loaded type, meaning that it includes many generalizations and assumptions that aren't necessarily true to confuse our students. In my group's particular case, it also included bias to further manipulate them into responding how we wanted them to. The question is, should a person be considered a criminal for betraying their country by leaking classified government information capable of hurting the general public beyond repair to the wider society? This time, we got what we wanted, as 5 students, or an 83.3% of the people surveyed, replied yes, and only 1 student, or 16.67% of those surveyed, replied no. In this question, we picked a highly controversial topic and manipulated our students through language by making the assumption that governments spy on the general population, and that someone who divulges this is, in fact, an abominable criminal. The last question was also loaded and dealt with the same topic, but it was just worded differently. It was, should an individual be regarded as a hero for making public top-secret political intel that is of great interest to the overall population, thus uncovering their nation's wrongdoings? Out of the 6 students surveyed, only 5 answered this question, which might suggest that 1 student was not confident enough to respond. Out of the remaining 5, 4 said yes, which means that a fairly large group of students contradicted themselves in their answers to these 2 questions, as they asked the same thing but employed different terminology, and this ultimately seems to have confused them. The third question, are you among the best students in your grade, was more simple. We just wanted to assess how students tend to overestimate their strengths. Thus, we wanted most of them to reply yes, and we tried to do so by including the word best, which in this case was ambiguous and undefined. However, most of them said no, most probably because contrary to what we thought was going to happen, they actually felt intimidated by such term. Again, this is mere speculation, but I do believe that although unexpected, these results do prove how language can be used to manipulate others, just not how we wanted it to. Conversely, the 5th question, have you ever done a really lousy job in a particular school assignment, was a test of how students tend to underestimate their weaknesses, to which 5 people replied yes and only 1 replied no. This might have been due to the use of the words ever and particular, which narrowed down the students' option of saying no, because they know that throughout their lives they must have done a bad job at something at least once. This proves how language can be used to manipulate others, but again, the analysis is just mere speculation. The 4th question, is the death penalty, taking someone's life as the ultimate punishment for their crimes ever deemed justifiable, was meant to prove that students usually don't admit that they hold unpopular opinions. We included a brief explanation of what the death penalty is, in which we covertly intended to humanize criminals facing such sentence. However, our results were quite different than we had thought they would be, as 3 people said yes and another 3 said no. Although it is not what we had planned for, this exactly half division of answers does show that the surveyed students probably gave this question much thought, and therefore it also shows how language can be used to manipulate others. The 6th question was, if you saw someone being bullied at school, would you help that person out? And it basically was meant to assess how people tend to like to think that they do more in those types of situations than what they'd actually do. However, the responses were exactly halved again, as 3 students said yes and another 3 said no. Like the 4th question, we probably managed to get students to give this question much thought, and that says a lot about the knowledge issue in question. Besides, we picked the topic of bullying because we knew that it is a problem in all schools, which in retrospect might have worked against us, as a lot of students could possibly be fed up with it and consequently said no just to rebel against school policies. However, I reckon that if we had further humanized the victim, our results would have been closer to what we first had in mind. This knowledge issue is clearly linked to the WO case of language and reason, as sometimes complex or rather simple language can intimidate and manipulate us, hindering our ability to reason properly. This also has to do with emotion, given that when this happens, people are already in an altered state of mind that will be an obstacle for them in how they interpret the text or content being analyzed. In terms of AOKs, this can be seen in math and environmental systems, where word problems can get to be very confusing at times and not straightforward, which intimidates the students and hence sometimes renders them unable to answer the questions appropriately. This has happened to me in many tests for both courses, especially in last year's ESS exam.